Good afternoon and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, Introduction to Human-Centered Design webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Next slide, please. It's my pleasure to have you all here this afternoon. My name is Courtney Swanson and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Today, I am filling in for our program advisor, Shanta Balai. If you have any questions for her, you can find her contact information on the last slide of this slide deck. If you have future questions about this webinar or other programs we offer, the college's contact information will also be on the last slide of this presentation. I am delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, Introduction to Human-Centered Design webinar. Human-Centered Design, or HCD, is a powerful and practical method to create meaningful change in your workplace and in your community. During this session, you will get an overview of some important principles and tools that designers use to create positive impact through their work, strategies for adopting HCD methods in your life, and a glimpse into the empathetic mindset of a human-centered designer. We will also talk about the importance of equity in HCD and how these methods are connected to system thinking and sustainability practices. Whether you work in private or nonprofit organizations, or are a community member looking to affect change in your neighborhood, HCD can help you create innovative and empathy-driven solutions to the problems you care about. In this webinar, we will cover identifying your customers or user groups and understanding their diverse needs through observation and conversation. Designing an impactful problem statement centered on research insights, developing solutions through an iterative process of generating and prototyping ideas, and refining designs based on meaningful user feedback. It's a pleasure to introduce the presenter of today's webinar, Emily Stover. Emily is a multidisciplinary designer with over 10 years of experience solving problems using human-centered design. She believes that design has the power to create more equitable and adaptive communities and is passionate about increasing access to human-centered tools and methods for people working hard to make a difference. Emily, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom on this topic. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Courtney, for the introduction, and thank you to the college for having me today. And of course, thank you to all of the attendees here. As Courtney was mentioning, I'm really passionate about this topic. I'm really passionate about human-centered design and the change it can affect in the world. And I'm so happy you're here to learn a little bit more about what this is. So here's what you can expect today after I get us started with some introductions. I'll spend a little bit of time defining what human-centered design actually means. Several working definitions that you can use as a way to frame the way you think about design in the world. I'll talk about human-centered design models, specifically the ones I appreciate, the ones that I use. Some of the elements of human-centered design, how you actually practice this work, and how you might be able to practice this work when you do your work in the world. And finally, how you might apply human-centeredness in organizations, and also when you think about larger systems beyond a single organization. I just want to say that design is a dialogue, and for one thing, I'll be asking some questions of you all, so feel free to post in the chat when I do. And I also will speak a little bit about other design theorists and design practitioners that I find really inspiring and informative. And I recommend, if there's somebody that seems really interesting, that you go and check out their work. There are a lot of people practicing in this world, and the more you can learn from them, the more you'll be human-centered in your work, and the world will be more human-centered as well. So, as Courtney mentioned, I am Emily. Hey, thank you again for being here. I am a trained designer. My background is actually in architecture and landscape architecture. My personal practice is pretty divergent in that I have worked in product design adjacent to graphic design and experience design. And at some point about 10 years ago, I was invited to begin teaching in interdisciplinary design here at the University of Minnesota, in part because I'm a bit of a generalist. And when I started doing that, I realized a few things. One was that design methods aren't just for designers. Trained designers. They're actually really, really beneficial to people who are working in all kinds of different ways. Anyone who's trying to solve a problem and be innovative in their work can benefit from these practices. The second thing that I learned is that I didn't really understand what the design methods were, even though I had worked as a designer for so long, just because it was never really taught explicitly in design school. And that actually learning this and teaching it to others has made me a better designer with more creative outcomes. So even if you are a designer with a capital D, you might benefit from some of these methods as well. So for, I think about the past 7 years, I have built on my teaching practice and have been working as a practice-based researcher at the Minnesota Design Center here at the university. And a lot of my work has been working with organizations, specifically private sector organizations, nonprofits, or public sector organizations and nonprofits, so government and other mission-based organizations, to really embed human-centeredness in their work and in their projects and in their staff. One of my recent projects was with the Minnesota Department for Employment and Economic Development, really learning how to create innovation spaces and do some initial training for their employees. So I consider my work generally to be about human-centered design for system change. I want to make a quick note before we start moving into the definitions of human-centered design, and that's, I use this term user or end user a lot, and I didn't add it to my slides, but I just want to let everybody know that this is a design-based term for the person who is going to be actually using your design. And it's really meant to be agnostic of the relationship between the designer and that human, that person. And just because not every user is a client or a customer. You and your work, you and your organization might use different words, and that's okay. But user, that is what user means in this context. So initially, design is kind of a loaded term. So I like to just break it down really quickly, because a lot of people here might think design is something somebody else does, somebody who has been trained, somebody who has a lot of experience. But in fact, design is something that is a really, really human activity. It is a planful act of creating something new. And I imagine, and I'm going to ask you to spend just a moment thinking, what have you made that was new in the past week? Something that was intentional, something that was really, really explicit. What is something new that you have made in the last week? And I would love for you to either just keep it in your mind, or you can put it in the chat. You can share it with the rest of us. It can be something really simple. You could have made a meal, a really, really considered meal. You could have reorganized where you keep your supplies so that it was a little bit more effective for you. You could have done file management. That is also kind of design, right? You are seeing something and doing something to make it a little bit better. So how have you designed in the last week is my question to you all. When you have it, again, just hold it in your head for the rest of this talk, just because I'm curious about how you've actually used some of the methods that I'll be telling you about today in the work that you've done. You might have done it almost intuitively, because the truth is that human-centered design is not really difficult. It's actually pretty simple and pretty intuitive for a lot of folks. It's just that to actually practice it in the world takes a little bit of a mindset shift. It takes a little bit of actually a culture shift to think about humans first. Okay, so again, I've mentioned capital D design, and I want to differentiate, again, the way a lot of people think about design and designers and the way I'm talking about design today. So capital D design. I can say this because I'm a designer, but it's really discipline specific. There are all kinds of different design disciplines. Some that come to mind are architecture, graphic design, product design. It could be experience design. It could be fashion design. It's typically combining aesthetics and function in a really, really specific way, and requires extensive training and professional experience. Capital D design, it's a job, right? Lowercase d design is something that I think is a core competency for all humans. It's actually part of what makes us humans. It's a problem-solving methodology, specifically a creative problem-solving methodology. And I believe increasingly critical in a changing world, specifically learning how to apply it consciously. This fellow, one of my experts, is kind of the original expert in human-centered design. His name is Herbert Simon. He was a a theorist, organizational theorist. He was a political scientist, kind of a polymath. He got a Nobel Prize in economics, and a lot of his study is around organizational theory and behavioral economics, specifically how people and organizations make decisions together. And in the Sciences of the Artificial, he wrote that design is concerned with how things ought to be in order to attain goals and to function. And in a way, this work, his work, has really created this framework for lowercase d design to happen, because it's about seeing a problem and really methodically trying to make it a little bit better. My definition, Emily Stover's definition, which is kind of glomming a lot of this together, is that design, human-centered design, is an iterative process of problem framing and solution testing. So we do it multiple times. It's partially about seeing that problem and then testing solutions for solving it. But everything is rooted in human needs, that empathetic understanding of other people and what they need, what problems they need solved. Some of you may be familiar with this human-centered design model. It was popularized by the D School, who have taken the work of Herbert Simon and a lot of other people and made it a thing, a program, a boot camp. You can go there and learn about all of this and spend quite a lot of money. But they developed this 5-part design model that I'm actually a little bit ambivalent about. I use all of these phases of design, but I don't think this happens in a linear fashion, which is what this model would indicate. However, I am using these larger definitions of activities, the human-centered design activities, to frame our talk today. So I think it's important to discuss. The first one is empathize, which, to break it down, it's really about finding stories from other people, spending time really listening. Next, we define, which is about falling in love with the problem and falling in love with the right problem, which is really tricky. Next, generate ideas. This is really about improv and generating lots of ideas that you might know yes and. It's creating ideas, suspending analysis. Prototyping, you have ideas. What are the good ideas? How can you prototype in order to learn more? And finally, test. Testing is about finding points of weakness and about failing and hopefully failing forward. I really love the double diamond. It's something that I use in a lot of my work, and it essentially breaks the design process into 2 distinct phases. First, we're doing research, really trying to understand what is going on, what the problem is. And the second part is when we're designing. So you don't just get your problem and move directly into design. You spend your time really, really understanding what problem it is. So the way the double diamond works is like this. At the beginning, you get your challenge, right? It could be from a client, it could be something that you see in your organization. And then you start to break down that challenge and understand more about it. So doing a lot of discovery before you define your problem. So in the entire first half of the design process is really making sure you have the right problem. Then generating lots of ideas, so developing ideas to solve that problem before finally delivering your final design outcome. This seems a lot more linear than it is. There's a lot of iteration that happens at every stage of this design process, but I think this general model really, really resonates with me because it is so solid in how it's asking you to define that problem. This is an iteration on the D School model that I want to discuss just because it starts to build in a couple of additional phases. So it's called the Liberatory Design Model that they developed in partnership with the National Equity Project. And it's really about taking the time throughout the design process to do a few things. First is understand who you are. What is your position in this design process? What are you bringing? What are your experiences and skills? And also, what are some assumptions that might not be totally correct? And secondly, to consider your impacts. You are working with people and you might be impacting them. You might be impacting systems in ways that you don't totally understand. So being really, really mindful of how you're interacting with all these complex parts is also important, and being an equitable practitioner of design, doing it with authenticity and effectiveness. This is Dr. Leslie Ann Knoll. She's a professor of design studies at North Carolina State University and has done a lot of work around equity in the design research process. She really challenges designers to think critically about whose voices are included in the design process and says it's essential to see and understand what position we're looking from when we look at people and the problems we seek to solve for them. So again, really understanding your own position and your own power and making sure that you're sharing that in a way that's responsible. We're moving into the first part of the elements of human-centered design, which is to build empathy. And this is another really, really seminal figure in human-centered design, Jane Fulton Surrey, who is a social scientist. She was a practitioner of, is I think still practicing as leading a human factor design and research at IDEO, which is a design firm in the Bay Area. Works in close partnership with the D School at Stanford University. So she says that people are not passive consumers of design. They are active designers of their own world and always have been. And in essence, we're trying to understand that the users or the humans that we're working with, they're not receiving design only. They are actually experts in their own experience. And we need to treat them like experts in the design process, whatever design we're doing. So there's some really easy ways to do this. It's not difficult. The way that you understand other people's needs are first to be really humble. Understand that you may be an expert in your field, but you're not an expert in someone else's needs. So coming into this process with a lot of humility and a lot of curiosity, right? If you can really dig in and care and be curious about other people's experience, it really benefits the design process in a way that I think is beneficial. So, and then 2 specific actions that you can take when you're trying to understand other people are spend some time trying to observe them, observe people in action. And second, have conversations, speak with them. I'll talk a little bit more about some tools. This is the empathy field guide from the D School. The D School has a lot of excellent resources if you're interested in getting involved in this work. So the empathy field guide has some guidelines for how to derive an understanding of somebody's needs or experience by watching them. What might they be thinking, feeling, seeing, and doing? And finally, how to have real conversations with people that can derive design insights. It's essentially to build rapport, make somebody trust you, understand that you are a person who's trying to help, and try to dig for stories, really understand them from a story perspective. What are some things they've experienced? Keep asking questions. And then finally, try to understand the emotional context of that story. How did this thing make them feel? What did it make them do after? Because of course, we're trying to get people to have positive experiences with a design change. This is Yuri Levine. He's so in love with problems. He's an Israeli entrepreneur and the CEO of Waze. He is so in love with falling in love with the problem that he has branded it on T-shirts and I think cars. So he says, fall in love with the problem, the solution will follow. And I can't emphasize this enough. I think we're in a society that really preferences problem solving as opposed to problem seeking. If you think about your K-12 education or your workplace, people are rewarded for solving the problem, not necessarily finding the right problem. And I think that has to change. So one tool that designers use, I call them magical how might we questions. It makes it feel a little bit more, I don't know, enjoyable. And I think they can actually be magical. This is why. So how might we? How indicates there is a solution. Something out there is going to solve this thing that we're seeing in the world, something that we've understood from people. Might means, hey, it's okay that we don't know what it is. We're not going to leap to the last page of the book. We are going to go into this really open about what some of these solutions might be. Design is collaborative. We are going to find it together. Question mark. It's going to be an adventure. Design, no matter what problem you're trying to solve, should be pretty fun. I think it should be fun. I do want to make a quick caveat about the term we, because in In traditional design settings, we has indicated the design team. And traditionally, that design team is not particularly diverse, not particularly inclusive. And of course, we're working really hard to change that. But when you are designing in the world, it's really, really important that you're doing it in authentic partnership with a range of people. So making sure that at every stage of the design process, you make sure that we is not just a design team, that you're including other people in that. All right. I wanted to have a quick example of what defining a question might look like, because problem framing is just a really powerful opportunity to frame different kinds of design challenges with vastly different end results. Designing your problem is actually a design project in and of itself. So my example here is Ty. So you imagine Ty maybe works in your office, is always running late for work. He shows up, he's agitated, unprepared for the day, so you decide to find out a little bit more about that. You talk to Ty, and you discover that Ty is really, really hectic because he's rushed or stressed because he doesn't have a clear plan for his family in the morning. So Ty needs a better way to prepare for the morning the night before, because he makes better decisions when he isn't rushed or stressed. So some examples of taking this design problem and framing it as a how might we question is, one might be, how might we help kids get excited about meal prep? Perfectly valid response to trying to help Ty with this problem. Another design team response might be, how might planning the morning meal be a joyful experience? How might we empower kids through their morning routine? And finally, how might we create a family routine that feels like a fun game? Just some examples of how you can take this one simple example problem and define it in a number of different ways through how might we's. So next, right, you have your ideal problem frame, the one that you think is really great. Ty's on board, his family's on board, for example. We're going to start doing idea generation, and I want to have some creative fluency is an important concept when you're thinking about idea generation. It's a human's natural ability to generate lots and lots of ideas. One thing about creative fluency that is often very surprising, I know my students are surprised by it, is that quantity is way better than quality during idea generation. It's actually to your detriment if you are focusing on the one perfect idea. You want to generate lots and lots of ideas. I have my students set a timer and try to come up with 100 ideas in like 10 minutes. It forces you to have really, really silly ideas, and that's actually where some really beautiful moments can happen. You have to withhold analysis and judgment when you're doing idea generation. If you're like, good idea, bad idea, good idea, bad idea, you're going to lower your creative fluency. When you're doing this and you're doing it well, you start to find non-obvious connections and really innovative thoughts, ideas, or seeds. So making sure that in creative, when you're doing idea generation, that you're really focusing on your own personal fluency. And a lot of people are out there saying, I'm not creative, I'm not creatively fluent. You are actually. Studies have shown that you can improve quite drastically just with a little bit of practice. As our next person, Grace Hawthorne, who teaches at the D School, does research at Stanford as an entrepreneur. I think her latest project is Paper Punk, which is sort of this origami idea generation project. But she says that your creative capacity is like a muscle that needs to be exercised to strengthen and flourish. Anyone can increase their creative capacity by exercising it. She also did this really interesting work at Stanford, where she partnered with a behavioral scientist. She wanted to understand how creative methods affects the brain. And I won't go into all of the insights, but the short version of the story is the more you think, the harder it is. That actually you can overthink being creative. You've got to kind of shut off that analytical brain just a little bit to generate lots and lots of ideas. One of her projects at Stanford right now is the Creative Gym. It's a program for expanding creative confidence and fluency, and she has a great book about that creative fluency. Okay, so you may recognize the little diamond shape. That's actually part of what makes my double diamond model. It's not mine, it was developed by the British Design Council. But talking about divergent and convergent thinking, in idea generation. So when you're diverging during idea generation, you are creating a lot of choices. That's the part where you're not analyzing, you're just gathering as much as you can through creative fluency. Then you start to converge and make choices. So you are taking all of your ideas and you're analyzing them. You're thinking, what works? What kind of hits my target points? What are my goals and what's getting me closer to these goals? So in divergent and convergent thinking, again, your first idea is probably your worst idea. That's okay. It's probably going to be the most obvious one. Everyone's going to have that idea. Again, lots of ideas, more better ideas. When you have a lot of ideas, you have more ideas to evaluate and test. So once you have all of these ideas generated, you start to think about what are the goals? How can I evaluate them? How can I pick a few to move forward with? Into the next phase, which is to prototype. So people hear prototyping and might get really worried. Does it build a real thing, a real version? That's not what prototyping is. It's actually anything that moves your idea forward. When I do work in government, people equate prototyping with piloting. And a pilot is, we're going to work on this for 18 months and it's going to be fully built and we're going to invest several thousands of dollars. And actually, that's not a good way to move forward with a prototype. A prototype is quick, it is dirty, it is low fidelity, and it is something that helps you identify areas to improve. So a great method for prototyping is to ask yourself, what else do I need to learn? And try to design an experiment around that. So instead of proving that this is a good idea, try to think about where are some holes in what I've built? How can I learn more? What is my experiment? So why should we test? Again, this helps you check your own assumptions, thinking about exactly what your user needs. Challenge yourself through prototyping. You want to find some of those design weaknesses early before you go into that full scale final prototype, super expensive, thousands of dollars, and really identify opportunities. And finally, it's fun. When you're prototyping well, prototyping quickly, it's really, really enjoyable and hopefully saves you time and saves you money and saves you a lot of heartache when your perfect design solution has a lot of flaws. This is Tim Brown, co-chaired IDEO, again, Bay Area. He says, don't think of it as failure, think of it as designing experiments through which you're going to learn. A healthy relationship to failure is really important for human-centered design. It's something that actually you can and should be embracing. So here are some examples of lo-fi prototyping. This is an example from IDEO. I think Tim Brown actually writes about this. Again, quick and easy tests, ideally with readily available materials. One of the IDEO design teams was working with a healthcare group trying to design a surgical tool. I don't know what the surgical tool does, sorry. But they were working with clients, they were looking at, with surgeons, trying to figure out exactly how they perform this particular procedure. And a designer, they were just really having a hard time communicating. And somebody went next door, grabbed a couple of readily available materials, built this sort of thing that they can use to try out with folks. And it actually turned into a pretty similar design at the end of it, just by using, what is this, a dry erase marker and a clip and, I don't know, is that a film canister and some tape? So it's amazing how much you can learn just by doing something really quick, something really dirty, something that's not at all refined. It just gives you enough of a basis to continue building on it. I have some examples of what, especially students or partners always say, how do I prototype a thing that's not a product, not a thing I can hold in my hands? And there are lots of different tools. One might be storyboarding. We all know storyboards from the movies, trying to understand your human's experience as they move through the experience of this design. So trying to map that, especially if you're starting to map an emotional state. Storyboards are a great tool. You can just use paper. Speaking of paper prototypes, often used in web design. You can use them for anything. So really trying to understand what that layout is like when you're holding it. As an example, role playing. I love role playing in design. I think this is the Service Design Lab based in Singapore. They're testing, I believe, a bus service. So role playing, a simple role playing activity can help you understand, again, your user's needs. Just some examples of tools that you can use to really quickly prototype a design idea. Okay. How do you do it? Again, embrace failure. Engage experts, especially your users. You don't want to be doing this in a vacuum. You really want that direct feedback because their feedback is critical to making those design refinements in an iterative process. Obviously, listening is really important. People fall in love with their ideas and then don't really listen to critical feedback. It kind of turns into like a confirmation bias process. So test it with your users. Remember to listen, build a focus group. I know a lot of qualitative researchers are really well-versed in focus groups. So create that space for users to give you genuine feedback so you can continue to refine your ideas. Because remember, this is iterative. You don't just do one pass, you seek failure, and then you build something better. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about human-centered organizations. You learn all these skills and practices, and how do you start to practice this in the world? And I'm going to make a couple of cases for why you should. So I don't work in the private sector really, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my understanding of a traditional organization. So a leader, it has experience, intuition, a big paycheck maybe. They are meant to kind of predict organizational needs and strategy, oftentimes with a lot of information. It's not done in a vacuum, but they're meant to really steer the proverbial ship. The managers take that vision and translate it to frontline employees who try to execute that vision, trying to serve customers' user needs. Sometimes it works. Sometimes, a lot of times it doesn't work. I bet everybody here has a story about it not working. So ideally in a human-centered organization, you're starting from the other direction. Those frontline employees who really understand users, are experts in their needs, can be the ones who are collecting experiences and insights, which can then inform a design process that's really centered on user needs. In partnership with management, they can build and test ideas, working with their users, with their customers to get really regular feedback. And eventually it works. It's going to take probably a little bit longer, but it's going to cost less money and take less time in the long run because you know you're solving your customers' or your users' real needs. Also, added benefit, everyone's contributions are meaningful. So all of the staff throughout this process feels like they're actually solving something real instead of trying to hit a target based on, again, someone's strategy. I also want to note, so I've got the World Economic Forum's top 10 skills for 2025 here, which really align well with human-centered design. So if you're a person looking to skill up or reskill in a changing world, human-centered design is a pretty effective direction. So it starts talking about things like innovation, problem solving, leadership, resilience. All of them are almost reflected, except for around technology and AI and things like that. So again, a really important set of skills to start to build, also because you can bring them to your organization and make it more human-centered. So the other benefits I see to having a more human-centered organization are as follows. So those leadership priorities, leaders are still really important, but they start to reflect the customer needs, the user needs, so the organization becomes more effective in their mission. The employees, the staff who are implementing this process feel more trusted and feel like their work is more meaningful. And studies show that people who are trusted and feel like their work has meaning tend to stay at their organization. So employee retention will go up, should go up. Your relationships with your customers and communities will flourish because they'll feel more listened to. They'll feel like you're addressing their needs and concerns. Collaborative teams will be more inclusive and more productive because you're working with a larger set of people to inform all of these challenges and your solutions. Your organization is, I think, better equipped to adapt to future disruption because you have these sets of skills and this practice and these methods and this mindset embedded in the organization. You're going to be better able to respond to future disruption when it happens. And we all know it's going to happen in some form or fashion. So Next, I'm going to move a little bit into human-centered systems. So zooming out from organizations and thinking about how we're connected beyond organizations. So this is Danella Meadows, she's such a hero of mine. She was an environmental scientist. She's a MacArthur Fellow, and I think really popularized the concept of systems thinking, if you've heard of it. So she says that systems are interconnected sets of elements that are coherently organized in a way that achieves something. Pretty simple definition, right? So I don't know how popular or familiar people are with the term of wicked problems, but they're out there. You can't really open a paper or watch the news without seeing something, but wicked problems are a complex social or cultural problem with unknown number of potential solutions. A design theorist and an urban planner, Riddle and Weber, wrote a lot about wicked problems in 1973. They were seeing problems in their research that just didn't really align with the typical definition of what a problem is. They were just stickier, knottier, a lot more complex, a lot more divisive. So one of their readings actually starts to create a definition for what a wicked problem is, or a way to understand when a problem is wicked, that I recommend, although it can be a little disheartening. So in other words, a wicked problem would be a system that's incoherently organized and not achieving enough, back to Danella Meadows' definition. So some of Danella Meadows' tips for influencing systems actually start to relate back to human-centered design and what you can do as a designer. The first one that she has is design for individuals, not for systems. Create a cohesive vision of what a successful system looks like. Design for sharing, design for giving back. Be human-centered in your work if you want to change systems. Oh, I'm sorry, this was from Dustin Propakov, a different reading. This is Jonathan Owens, who is well, I'll say that be human-centered. I was going to tell a story about a student a couple of years ago. I was talking about human-centeredness, and they said, I am so sick of centering humans because humans have ruined a lot of things. And I don't blame them. I think in some ways they're right. But I want to really quickly address the challenge of designing for humans when, humans have been kind of a challenge. So this is Jonathan Owens. He's a designer, a filmmaker, executive director of the Sentient Collective, which is a group of really, really interesting and experienced creative people, researchers, producers who are working around the environment and changing the environment through design, or the relationship with the environment through design. So he says design cannot be considered to truly have humans at its core if it is ultimately further contributing to pollution, landfill mass, and exploitation of cheap labor. So he really wants to change the relationship between us and environmental systems. So non-humans and human-centered design. What does that look like? So it's a term that's popularized, life-centered, or becoming more popular, life-centered design, which is about considering non-human life as end users of a product. So if I'm designing something that is not benefiting a adjacent life form, like the fish or what have you, it's really not life-centered and ultimately not human-centered. All decision-making in these spaces really account for that triple bottom line. So we're talking about economics, the environment, and social benefits. Ideally, designers are using natural systems as inspiration for human-built systems. There's a field of practice called biomimetics that are really looking to natural systems to help inform some of the things that we might be doing as humans to better live in partnership with the earth. And ultimately moving towards a future where people live in a more connected way with the environment. So human-centered design becoming more life-centered in general starts to ultimately benefit humans. I want to make one quick final note about this as well, that life-centered, it's an emerging mindset for people who are Westerners, but not for a lot of other cultures around the world. So trying to unlearn some of these practices and being a little bit more life-centered in our work and in our organizations, I think will has the power to do a lot of good. I think that's what I have now. So I am really curious about how you have been a designer in making a planful act for creating something new in your work, and any other questions that might be out there for me. I'm ready for Q&A if you are.
Thank you so much, Emily, for
Yeah.
presenting on the topic. It was wonderful to hear about all of the parts of human-centered design. We will now move towards the Q&A portion of the webinar. I apologize in advance if we do not get to your question. Our first question is regarding human-centered design, what if the needs of the end users and the leader/manager don't align?
I mean, it's a good question. That's a great question. It's one that I've run into so many times. How do you make organizational priorities really reflect the needs of the end users? And it's something that I think happens through culture change, honestly, in an organization. It's hard for individuals to do this unless they are learning how to be more human-centered within their area of control, right? You can't necessarily directly impact, depending on your role, directly impact leadership decisions. So trying to make sure that you are human-centered in what you do and in the control that you do have, because we all have control in the work that we do or the way that we work in our communities, right? We all have influence. So trying to understand the influence that you do have, how you can be more human-centered in that work will eventually start to shift culture and hopefully impact leadership priorities. If you are in a leadership position, I encourage you to learn more about human-centeredness and to really start asking questions about people who have direct insights of end user needs, because that is the most important thing you can do to make sure that those priorities are really aligning with real needs to everyone's benefit.
All right, our next question is, the non-humans and HCD slide is very interesting. When we are solving problems, are we only centering the human users? How about other human stakeholders?
Other human stakeholders who aren't direct users? Absolutely. I feel like, yeah, I think that kind of gets to questions about how you're influencing systems through your work, because even you don't want to have negative impacts on non-users, right? Understanding how you're having impact beyond just the relationship between the design and the user experience of the design, I think is an important part of evaluating your solutions or potential solutions. Is this hurting someone else? Is this benefiting someone else indirectly? Is this benefiting, environmental and ecological systems indirectly? Trying to understand some of those like ripple effects of your work is really important. So, and there are often, when you do a human-centered design process, you're thinking about different types of clients, different types of users. And so the indirect user might also be an important user group to consider. I hope that answered that. Great question. Yay, more.
At a time when humans are seemingly more and more disconnected from each other, what are the gains and losses or challenges seen in the field of HCD when dealing with a workforce that is so remote-based and no longer in person?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there is so much great work being done right now in remote collaboration and how to do it well. And obviously, human-centered design is collaborative. You're working in partnership. So I don't know if there is a great answer. I do know that I have done work with people remotely that has been extremely effective. And I think it can be done. You just have to be really, really direct and really considered in how you engage with the people that you're working with, and making sure that you're creating spaces where you can speak, where you can hear them and listen and really deeply listen, and also engage them in a process of feedback. It's a tricky moment to try to navigate that. But to be honest, I feel like we're learning a lot about how to be connected with our design teams and our customers, our users in a remote environment. Another good question.
All right. I work with and manage volunteers.
Mhm.
Do you think that there is a way to manage volunteers through human-centered design? And what would that look like?
I think you can definitely use the human-centered design process for that. I think the first thing that I would do is start speaking to your volunteers and understanding their experiences and their needs. For example, without knowing the specific challenges that you're facing, are you having a hard time scheduling volunteers in an effective way? Get in there, talk to them, just be like, what is it like to schedule your session or your time slot? Are there any challenges? Like how could this be more efficient? And just having conversations and framing design problems through there. So how might we make it easier to get into our online portal and sign up? How might it be more effective to communicate the schedule to the volunteer team? Things like that. And then you can start to develop solutions around those questions, those how might we questions. I hope that helps.
What advice do you have for socializing the impact or importance of human-centered design to stakeholders in your organization?
So how to be maybe a champion for human-centered design? Am I understanding that right, Courtney?
I think so.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So I think the best way to do it is there are a few ways. I think number one, start doing it. Like I was saying earlier, we all have influence. We all have things that we can do in our work to be more human-centered. I think demonstrating it can be really, really effective in saying like, oh, hey, I talked to this user, I talked to these customers. This is what I understand. This is how I'm going to proceed. I think can be, again, really effective. Find other champions in your organization, people that are really interested in changing the culture around how we work with users and how we are more human-centered and empathy-driven in our work, because there are people who are going to have the same interests that you have, right? There are people who are going to want to do the same things. So make a little community around it as much as you can. And I think starting to ask for the time and the resources that you would need to test out human-centered design in your organization, to prototype it, because it doesn't have to take a lot of time or a lot of money, but maybe you need an extra half day of meetings to try to be more human-centered in some way, to do some activity that's human-centered. So starting to do work this way where you can, connect with other people who are interested in this kind of work, and then finding those small little places where you can start to implement it and test it and show the results, I think go a long way to changing the culture on human-centered design in organizations.
All right. When working with program managers who want to implement a change based on one's user experience, how do you champion HCD while trying to get them to stop using focus groups of one?
Focus groups of one. Yeah, again, I think it would be really about trying to be really strategic in the influence that you have and trying to implement it. And I'm not sure exactly how to solve that particular challenge of getting more insight in, aside from maybe you can sneak a 15-20 minute phone call with someone else, with another user or customer, and use some of those empathy, the tools in the empathy field guide, and say, hey, I called someone, this is what I heard, this is what I think it means, this is the question that I have about this, what do you think? Yeah, we all have more power than we think.
Is there a system you use to build a design that assisted with achieving goals in terms of personal work, etc.?
Oh, like my personal work? Oh, yeah. I mean, humans. Oh, I do have a system. I have a great one. Again, from the D School. They've done so much great work. It's called Designing Your Life. I give this to students. I've given this to people my age who are really thinking about their own careers. It's a fantastic, I think, set of resources. Designing Your Life. It's David Kelly, again, at the D School. So it's really about taking some of these methods and applying them to your career, because, careers aren't linear. they're explorations and trying to do some perhaps low fidelity prototypes of potential futures can be really effective in making plans around what you want to do and how you want to do it. I hope does that answer the question, Courtney?
Yeah, I believe so.
Cool.
Who do you recommend in the HCD field that we should be following?
Ooh, that's great. I'm actually not on social media. I don't directly follow anyone. So I think a lot of the folks that I mentioned here today are great places to start. So Jane Fulton Surrey has got some great books. Sorry, I'm forgetting Grace Hawthorne's book. I don't have it in my notes. Sorry, I do have it. And it's great. It's about being more creative in your work. And shoot, Dr. Knowles' book as well. I don't have the name here. She also has a great set of cards that I've used that are about building more equity into the design process and really challenging our vocabulary in the design process. It's called the Designer's Critical Alphabet cards. So people like that who are really doing some deep thinking about how to take human-centered design and apply it even more effectively towards some of the really big challenges that we're facing. Those are some key ones that I can think of off the top of my head.
All right, with that, we are going to conclude our Q&A portion. Again, I apologize if we were unable to get to your questions. Thank you so much, Emily, for your time and your incredibly useful information and tools. It's been a pleasure having you here. If you have any questions you would like us to pass along to Emily, please send them to CCAP's info. There's also her contact information on this slide. Could you please share the next slide of the presentation? As I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording within a week of today's webinar. The recording will also be posted to our CCAP's webinar archive, as well as our CCAP's YouTube page. We also welcome feedback. Please use the QR code listed to provide any suggestions for future productions. The University of Minnesota employees are now eligible to receive well-being points for listening to our webinars. Please view the link to the form on the second to last slide of our webinar presentation. Next slide, please. The college's contact information is listed on the last slide if you'd like to learn more. Thank you for joining us today and have a wonderful afternoon.